Right now on Currents News, a solemn service. The Diocese of Brooklyn commemorates the Passion of Jesus Christ. We have exclusive coverage.
A day of prayer and meditation in the diocese with parishioners following safety protocols. I'm Emily Druby at St. James Cathedral Basilica with a look at the service.
It's a day of reflection. Cardinal Timothy Dolan explaining the deeper meaning behind one of the darkest hours.
Did you ever wonder with me why we call it Good Friday? Shouldn't it rather be Evil Friday?
Then Pope Francis's Way of the Cross, these meditations written by children. And Easter guidance, what you need to know before heading out to celebrate. The CDC has a warning. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Across the globe, Catholics are fasting, praying, and meditating on this Good Friday. Christ's crucifixion marks one of the most holy days in the Catholic faith. Currents News' Emily Druby is standing by in downtown Brooklyn at St. James Cathedral Basilica, where the Diocese of Brooklyn just wrapped up the solemn liturgy of the Lord's Passion. Emily.
Christine, I have to say I've been in masses since the start of this pandemic, and back in the beginning, priests were really nervous that parishioners would be slow to come back if they came back at all. But here today in these pews, they were totally full as they could be, while everyone still stayed socially distant. It was really an incredible sight. We're really seeing people come back to church. During Holy Week, I've been meeting people from all over. Today, I met somebody from Queens during this solemn event.
When the soldiers had crucified Jesus.
No bells, no candles, no crosses. The Cathedral Basilica bare this Good Friday.
It's a symbol of mourning, a symbol that Christ is in the tomb. So we take away most of the symbols that would distract us from concentrating on the death of Christ.
Betrayed by Judas the night before, Jesus carried his cross to the place of his death while being flogged and ridiculed on what is now Good Friday.
So Judas got a band of soldiers and guards.
The reading of the Passion, the universal prayers, and the adoration of the cross, different this year because of the pandemic.
We will not kiss the cross, but it will be shown to the people.
And the communion, which is not a mass, but from the host that was consecrated yesterday. Again, a way to remember the sacrifices that were made.
Jesus died for our sins. He saved us. He's our Savior and Redeemer.
This is Charles Lee's first Good Friday service. He's hoping it will deepen his faith.
Being in the presence here and seeing what goes on, I'll be able to experience and gain something that I have never thought about. And hopefully that will be meaningful to me.
Charles is one of those people I mentioned before. He came all the way here from Bayside, Queens. He went on to tell us that he would not have missed this, especially after last year. In downtown Brooklyn, Emily Druby, Currents News. Christine.
Thanks, Emily. Let me ask you one question. What happens next for Holy Week? Tomorrow is the Easter Vigil, right?
Yes, the Easter Vigil is tomorrow. It's very different from Good Friday because it's a very joyous event. Bishop Marzio will welcome new Catholics into the church. Now, the last time a diocese-wide vigil like this was held was back in 2019, where the bishop baptized about 50 men and women. Last year, the Mass had to be rescheduled because of the pandemic, and then instead, individual parishes took over and ended up having their own ceremonies. This year, the vigil services will take place at the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph at 7 o'clock, and you can watch them right here on Net TV. Christine?
All right, Emily, thank you. Net TV's live coverage of Holy Week Masses continues throughout this weekend. Like Emily said, on Holy Saturday, the Easter Vigil will air at 7. And for Easter Sunday, Net TV will air 5 Masses in different languages. The 8 a.m. in Italian, 9 a.m. in Creole, 11 a.m. in English, 1:30 p.m. in Spanish, and the 3 p.m. Mass in Polish. And as always, for more coverage of Holy Week events and to find services near you, head over to thetablet.org. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan sending Catholics an Easter Triduum message. His Eminence answering a question commonly asked: why is today called Good Friday when the day marks Jesus' agony and death?
Shouldn't we call it Evil Friday? Well, of course, the church has called it Good Friday because of the supreme good that happened. All right, so on Good Friday, yes, there was death, but 3 days later, there's going to be life.
Cardinal Dolan went on to say Catholics believe God can bring good out of evil and life out of death. At the Vatican, Pope Francis presided over the liturgy of the Lord's Passion as well. The pontiff using the service to pray for the victims of the pandemic. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has more.
Pope Francis walked into St. Peter's Basilica for Good Friday service in complete silence, prostrating himself, observing the most solemn day of the liturgical year. Good Friday is the only day of the year when Mass is not celebrated. Last year, COVID-19 had Italy in its grasp, and the Basilica was empty for Good Friday service. The country now back on lockdown, but around 200 people stayed socially distant for Service Friday. Good Friday service is rare in that Pope Francis does not give the homily, but during the solemn intercessions, he did pray for victims of the pandemic and the world during this difficult time. Pope Francis said, quote, "Almighty ever-living God, only support of our human weakness, look with compassion upon the sorrowful condition of your children who suffer because of this pandemic. Relieve the pain of the sick, give strength to those who care for them. Welcome into your peace those who have died. And throughout this time of tribulation, grant that we may all find comfort in your merciful love." After Good Friday service, the Pope prayed a version of the Way of the Cross written by a group of young people from a parish in Rome. This year's meditations highlighted the struggles of children. The prayer featured drawings made by children from foster families and people who are assisted by the church. The Pope prayed the Way of the Cross in St. Peter's Square. Only the children who wrote the prayers were there. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
With Italy facing another surge in coronavirus cases, the number of pilgrims who would normally travel to the Vatican for Holy Week has decreased. This is the second year in a row where the Vatican has to celebrate Easter under pandemic restrictions. With vaccination efforts underway, more people are starting to return, but it's still drastically different from how it looked in previous years.
Before, when you drove by the Vatican museums, you would see endless lines of people. Now, if you pass by, you see no one. It's quite strange.
Coronavirus restrictions in Italy have been extended through April. However, the country's government is looking at relaxing restrictions in Rome after Holy Week. The CDC is offering guidance to people looking to celebrate Easter with family this weekend. If it's been 2 weeks since your last vaccine dose, you can safely gather indoors with other fully vaccinated people without wearing a mask. Those who are not yet fully vaccinated are advised to stick to their own households. Unvaccinated people can still gather with others, but should do so outdoors, wear masks, and stay 6 feet apart. Pope Francis spent his Good Friday morning at a site vaccinating the homeless. Pictures show the pontiff welcoming doctors, nurses, and others at the vaccination space near St. Peter's Cathedral during the surprise visit. About 800 people have already been vaccinated there, and at least 400 more should be treated, according to the Vatican. The Pope, who has already been vaccinated, is urging others to do the same, calling it an ethical choice. And from our Good Friday coverage to the big national developing news story, a U.S. Capitol Police officer and a suspect are dead after an incident outside the building. The Capitol was put on lockdown after the suspect attempted to run through a security checkpoint.
The suspect rammed his car into 2 of our officers and then hit the north barricade barrier.
One officer later died. The other was injured. The suspect was shot and killed after getting out of the car with a knife. Police believe the suspect acted alone, and this was not connected to any larger threat. This is the second Capitol Police officer killed defending the building this year. The other was during the siege on the building January 6th. The opening week of testimony in the trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin wraps up Friday. He's charged with killing George Floyd during an arrest last May. Camila Bernal reports as Chauvin's actions were called totally unnecessary.
If your knee is on a person's neck, that can kill him.
The longest serving and most senior member of the Minneapolis Police Department says Derek Chauvin went against training during the arrest of George Floyd.
In all the years you've been working for the Minneapolis Police Department, been trained to kneel on the neck of someone who is handcuffed behind their back in a prone position?
No, I haven't.
What level of force might that be?
That would be the top tier, the deadly force.
Chauvin's knee was on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes.
Pulling him down to the ground, face down, and putting your knee on the neck for that amount of time is just uncalled for.
Minneapolis Police Department policy allows a police officer to use whatever means are available to him to protect himself and others, right?
Yes.
Did you see any need for Officer Chauvin to improvise by putting his knee on Mr. Floyd for 9 minutes and 29 seconds?
No, I did not.
Lieutenant Richard Zimmerman testifying officers have a duty to provide life-saving care even before paramedics arrive.
You need to provide medical care for the person that is in distress.
Camila Bernal, Currents News.
Our Holy Week coverage continues. After the break, the Holy Triduum kicked off last night with the Mass of the Lord's Supper. We have a closer look. Plus, Good Friday in the Holy Land as Israel lifts some coronavirus restrictions. And the Bishop of Brooklyn, an immigration expert, speaks out on the border crisis. The Mass of the Lord's Supper took place without the washing of the feet of parishioners, one of the many COVID-19 protocols. But the significance of the Mass was not lost. Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas Marzio called it a time to recognize the humility of Christ. Emily Druby has more from Prospect Heights.
The Mass of the Lord's Supper marks the start of the Easter Triduum and the meal Christ shared with his disciples before he was betrayed and crucified. It's a moment people wait for all year.
I suppose I cannot imagine reality without going into church during the Holy Week.
And I think coming to church today was important.
Normally, Bishop Nicholas Marzio would wash the feet of parishioners on Holy Thursday.
But because of the COVID regulations and the proximity to people, that's not going to be done tonight.
However, during his homily, he still shared the significance of the moment with parishioners, calling it a time to recognize the humility of Christ.
He tried to show how the disciples should be with one another, truly companions along the way.
The night is about celebrating the Eucharist and the priesthood. Parishioners were so grateful to receive communion after the pandemic prevented many from doing so for so long.
You never really know how much you will miss it until you want it. It's there, but you couldn't get it.
After celebrating Mass, Bishop Marzio processed with the Blessed Sacrament, bringing it to the repository, where it will remain until Good Friday services, when it will be taken out in commemoration of Christ's crucifixion and death. In Prospect Heights, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Christians in the Holy Land are taking steps towards normalcy this Holy Week as Israel eases up on coronavirus restrictions. Hundreds can be seen at the Church of All Nations meditating on Jesus' agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. More than a third of Jerusalem's population is now vaccinated against COVID-19. Air travel to Israel is still limited, keeping away the thousands of foreign pilgrims who would normally make a visit for Holy Week. Now to the crisis at the southern border, where there is an overwhelming number of migrants entering the U.S. Officials say almost 172,000 migrants crossed or tried to cross the border in March. That includes nearly 19,000 unaccompanied children, almost doubling the number of children arrested in February and setting a new record. To ease the burden on overcrowded Border Patrol facilities, the agency says migrant families are being released without notices to appear in court. Migrants who applied for asylum or immigration benefits during the Trump administration were oftentimes denied because they left a blank space on the application. Now, the Biden administration is ending that Trump-era rule. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services would reject applications when a blank space was left on the forms, including for things like middle name, passport, or travel document number, and other names used. Critics called it an attempt to crack down on legal immigration. The Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, is a leader on immigration. He sits down with Tablet editor Ed Wilkinson to talk about the current crisis on the border and what needs to get done to fix the situation there. Ed.
Thank you, Christine. And Bishop DiMarzio is with us today. We're lucky to have him because he's an immigration expert. And Bishop, a lot of talk about what's going on at our borders, especially our southern borders today. Seems like a lot more people are applying for asylum here in the United States. Are we heading in the right direction on our migration policy?
Well, certainly the international law tells us when someone presents themselves at your border and has a real fear and applies for asylum, they should be admitted. It doesn't mean they're going to be granted asylum. So we are following international law, and that's something good. At the same time, when you give the wrong signal, saying that we're not going to screen people at the border, then you're going to maybe create a stampede. I really have always thought that we need to do in-country processing. We need to be in those countries where people are in trouble, or in some neutral place where they can get to it. But making people take perilous journeys, being fleeced by coyotes who take their money and don't guarantee them ever getting to the United States is not the way to do it. We need to do something directly with these people to see who truly has a fear that would give them asylum. There are different ways of doing it, but having people come over the border, then we start to complain that they're being pushed together in one place and there's not adequate care. Of course there's not. It's almost impossible. So we have to rethink the system is not working properly.
Did President Biden, when he was campaigning, he encouraged people to come to this country and to immigrate. And now he seems to be changing his tune a little bit and saying that we're not quite ready yet, so take your time, don't come right now. Have we sent mixed signals to people who are trying to come to the United States?
What he said is he wanted to reform the immigration system, which I agree with. At the same time, when you say that out to the world, people say, okay, they think the borders are open. The last administration gave a very negative signal so that people stayed away. But when you speak positively, it attracts people. So you have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it, and give the directions clearly. Otherwise, you're going to see this massive influx of people which we can't handle properly, and where then people are going to complain that we're not treating them in the right way. So you've got yourself in a dilemma.
Well, we've been talking about immigration reform in this country for decades, and nothing ever seems to get done. What do we need to get done in order for the Congress to address these problems?
Well, there has to be compromise, and unfortunately, we're a deadlock system. It's all the Congress is thinking about in the Senate of how to beat the deadlock, where one group wins over the other. There's no compromise. Politics is the art of the possible. And the possible that is that can be sustained. You can have a momentary win, but that's not going to last very long if the other side doesn't agree with it.
Yeah.
We need to come together as a country. Politics needs compromise. Compromise that is not something that's permanent. The Holy Father says that in his latest work on Fratelli Tutti. He says compromise is temporary. It fixes the situation in a temporary way so that you can come to a permanent solution in the future. Very wise political advice the Holy Father gave us. I think the Congress and this should understand that.
Okay. Bishop, thanks so much for your insights on immigration.
You're welcome.
And now we're going back to you, Christine, at the news desk.
Thanks, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. Still to come on Currents News. The atmosphere is clean. A musician turned priest is using song to bring some light to the pandemic's darkness. There's no doubt this Easter season is once again different because of the pandemic. But one musician turned priest believes the story of Christ's death and resurrection can help lift us out of the dark times brought about by COVID-19. And he turned that belief into a song. Claudia Torres reports.
Easter is a celebration of hope triumphing in the face of despair. This year, it's also an opportunity to grow in faith during a spiritually challenging time. That's what inspired Father Mark Baumgarten of the Archdiocese of Perth in Western Australia to write the song Easter Sunday Morning. The musician turned priest says it was during the first series of lockdowns that he noticed the connection between the challenges of the pandemic and the story of Easter.
It was just during Holy Week and I was starting to be struck by the similarities between us being stuck behind closed doors in a sense, and with some of the, I guess you could say, bad headlines of recent years, and we've copped a little bit of a pounding in some ways. That there's some parallels with the apostles after the crucifixion, and they're kind of behind locked doors with their heads hung low.
It's Easter Sunday morning, but the sun has yet to rise. If the Lord is up to something, He's tremendously disguised.
The song conveys the sense of worry and confusion shared around the world during the early stages of the pandemic, only to suggest that hope is waiting just over the horizon. For Father Mark, music is more than storytelling. It's a way to capture life's powerful moments.
We are body and soul, and so those things that stir our bodies and our minds and our souls, music is a bit of an intersection of that, where you can have both lyrics as well as the sometimes mysterious properties that the musical melodies and the chords can have on us.
Easter Sunday Morning is the first single from Father Mark's upcoming album. It's also a song to console and uplift those facing challenges this Easter season.
On Easter Sunday morning.
That was Claudia Torres reporting. No word on when Father Mark's full album will be available, but Easter Sunday Morning is currently available on Apple Music and Spotify. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. On behalf of the Currents News team, we'd like to wish you all a very happy Easter. Hope to see you again next time.